Ever wondered which killer would win in an all-out brawl between them all? Today let's consider just that. If all the killers, including all of the legendaries too, fought, who would win? Let's get into it. To set the scene, I want to consider this happening as a sort of trial set up by the entity, with it placing all of the killers into one of the maps, say Shelter Woods, as it's nice and open, and tasking them to all fight until only one stands. I also want to consider what alliances might be made, and also what grudges some characters might hold, which could result in them falling faster. Let's first consider the first to fall. As the killers all clash at the start and the fighting breaks out, the first to fall are going to be the characters who don't have much in the way of defense, or speed probably, unable to escape the power of the others. The first to go I could see being twins, characters with very little protection and lacking in weaponry. Victor is their main weapon, and even the survivors can crush him. Nurse is another character where against survivors she's strong, but when faced with people directly attacking her, she'll be weak and caught extremely vulnerable during her fatigues. I could also see both Chucky and Tiffany naturally teaming up, but also wanting to fight, as is Chucky's nature. Ultimately though, I think they would absolutely be targeted as they're dolls and will be very easy to take out. And like, majority of the contestants here are all like bloodthirsty and want to kill, so yeah, they're going down fast. So I could see them both getting punted across the arena in the opening moments of battle, although maybe surviving some scuffles. It only takes one misplaced Nemesis boot to be rid of them though. Blight is another interesting character, as many of the killers probably hate him after all of the times he captured them and injected them with the blighted serum, a painful process by the looks of it. Therefore, a number of killers would likely come straight for Blight, and although he is durable and fast, I think they'd team up just for him, even if it's a short alliance. Naughty Bear, as funny as he is too, would definitely fall fast, considering he is literally just a stuffed bear. I could see him being tragically pulled apart by the Legion, each of them grabbing one of his limbs. Clown is another I could see going fast, as he'd likely be viewed as an easy target as he's slow and lumbering, and would be seen as an easy kill for many of the more aggressive killers. I could see Xenomorph taking a personal offense to Clown and his sloppiness, and easily managing to traverse his clouds and pierce his heart. I do think Clown could drop a few bottles though and cause a bit of disruption first. Another scuffle I could see happening is between Trickster and Mina, who are definitely on the weaker end of killers in comparison to the others. Therefore I could see their rivalry being watched on by the others and undisturbed, letting the two of them take literal shots at one another, peppering each other with knives, and the two of them felling one another, with maybe a few stray blades catching some others. There's some others too that just lack the defensive or offensive tools, to be honest, like both Artist and Boule Artist. The only weapon is hardened ink, and their clothing consists of a regular dress, so there's not much hope for them against the harsh weaponry that most of the killers wield, like Knight's Claymore or even something more brutal and dull like Huntress's Axe, so I could see them both falling relatively fast too. Tomie is interesting as well, as she kind of gets herself killed, and does so purposefully as she can regrow, so I could see her sort of just like willingly dying and thinking nothing of it, knowing she'll simply come back sooner or later. The final character we have that would be both targeted and avoided would be Plague, as she carries a plague. Many would want to avoid her, worried they'll catch the plague, but others would definitely want to attack her for this same reason, as this plague could easily cripple the weaker characters especially. Plague's best bet is going for a wide-spanning projectile vomit across everyone, accepting her fate as the entity's ruling and judgment, and dying at the hands of likely many blades. Initially survive, then fall is our next grouping. So after the initial outbreak of battle, I could see some killers breaking away, some forming groups and alliances, and from here on I think it largely becomes a slow picking away at the weaker characters until only the strongest remain to face one another. Legion are a good example of this, with the four of them initially surviving just based on the fact that they would outnumber other killers early on. Killers like Trapper may want to try and attack them, but refrain seeing four of them united. However, when Oni comes dashing over in full-on Blood Fury mode after the initial wave, they're pretty doomed. I could see them trying to put up a fight though, but ultimately being the easy pickings for the stronger killers. The same goes for Pig, a character who could easily sneak away from the initial outbreak, but would get caught eventually as she's not that sneaky, and her fighting capability is going to be heavily restricted by the fact that she has a lumbering pig mask on her at all times, and only a short blade to defend herself. I could see her placing a few bear traps though, maybe one onto Legion, another onto a character like Afton or something. I think ultimately she'd die to Billy, as he'd see a pig and remember his parents' prized pigs and want to slaughter her in the same way, mowing her down with a chainsaw. Rather poetic. Speaking of, Bubba is another character who is just sort of a guy, even if he is a bit bigger and stronger. He only really has his saw to defend himself. The great task for someone attacking him would be to get in close enough to do that though, as his tantrums make him hard to approach. Possibly the Cenobites could shoot out chains, binding him and holding back his saw. I could see Billy potentially trying to defend him, but I think really Billy is concerned with his own freedom more than anything, and so Bubba falls too. Deathslinger, despite being formidable, could only last so long with his busted leg and his spear gun only holding one round before it becomes basically just a bayonet. Before he goes down though, I could see him spearing another character, maybe Krasu, as she's fairly vulnerable, especially to a spear gun. With her guts being exposed, Slinger could slowly just like unravel her, leaving her elongated out like a big sausage, and hitting her with the Mori move, but falling shortly after to someone faster. I could see a battle-hardened character like Houndmaster enjoying the challenge of facing Slinger, seeing him as a worthy adversary. I could also see Houndmaster falling soon after though, with her only really having Snug as her main weapon, and simply being outclassed by stronger characters. She could try and face down a character like Jason, but she'd get skewered. Trapper's time would also come soon after too, with him being stronger than most, but still just being a guy with a machete pretty much. He is toughened and he has survived metal piercing his body, but he's also rebellious and likely hates just about everyone in the killer roster, meaning he's going to be all out fighting from the very start, maybe catching a few in traps, but likely just getting even more attention his way. It only takes him snaring someone like Spirit to be on the receiving end of a much sharper blade. Skull Merchant is another fairly formidable character who may initially survive due to having a large mechanized dual blade and a lot of info with her drones. However, when it comes to fighting majority of the killers one-on-one, she would not survive. I could see a sneaky character like Ghostface going for her though, also seeing her as a challenge and plunging his blade into her back, and maybe even taking a picture, avoiding her drone coverage. Afton is another who is not formidable at all really on the flip side, but does have a suit of armor essentially, keeping him alive for the initial wave, but then falling to, well, Pig's trap maybe that she placed earlier, or just about anything, with his head being exposed and him wielding only a pizza knife. Ferryman is fairly similar, just not having much to actually attack or defend with. He's got an oar, so I could see him escaping initially due to his speed, but ultimately falling. Potentially another Greek myth character would fell him, hating him for being the ferryman of the underworld. The final two to fall here I'm going with Doctor and Hag. Both pose threats in their own way, but are also very vulnerable. Doctor could shock and disrupt a lot of people, but also draw a whole lot of attention to himself. Many may be intimidated by his madness, but the madness he inflicts would also drive them to be more erratic and likely work against him eventually. I could see an even more maddened Wesker wanting to get his hands on Doctor, classifying himself as the smartest and better Doctor, tossing him into a wall and inflicting him with Ouroboros. Hag, on the other hand, could curse everyone, or a few people, making them weaker, but ultimately would be found and may be hunted too for this reason. She's physically weak otherwise, although deceptively so. She did rip regular people apart, but at this stage most of the regular people are gone, and so when faced with a more monstrous character like the Grizzly say, she wouldn't stand a chance. Put up a good fight, but fool, is where we'll go to next. The string of characters who would be strong enough to resist the greater strength ones, but not quite enough to survive any longer. This tier is mostly filled with characters of formidable strength or experience, but lacking in some way. Myers is a good example of this, being someone who is technically immortal as he can continually resurrect. However, he is just a guy still with a blade, and a kitchen knife specifically. And so I think he would be felled a few times before this point, but may ultimately just give up once he realizes he can't really do anything. Every time he does the coffin rise pose, he gets slammed back down by a Kanabo. Billy is another character I think would be very formidable for a lot of the time, being able to zoom around, being strong and wielding a chainsaw. We see in his cutscenes that he's pretty damn hard to kill and does put up a good fight against the sheriff and his deputies. Even against like guns, he wins. I think he'd be caught and defeated by something quicker though. I can see him trying to take down one of the animalistic killers like Xeno or Demo due to them being animals, but ultimately failing and getting his head mauled or something. Hunk is another good example of being seemingly unkillable in the ARA universe, Well, as a formidable soldier of Umbrella originally, he manages to survive just about anything and takes down tons of BOWs not too dissimilarly from the other RE protagonists, and therefore I think he would actually survive this long. It's just when he's faced with a round table of the Titans, for example, he's donezo. Glitchtrap I think would be slightly more formidable as it's technically a machine and is literally glitching in and out of reality, despite it being made flesh in the realm. I'm saying it's lived this long as I don't really know how to power scale this thing, but I doubt it would fall so fast as it does seem sneaky and tricky to capture. I could see Glitchtrap grouping up with Springtrap as well though, with them neglecting Movie Afton as he's a little too goofy for them. I could also see them betraying one another though, resulting in them being split apart and split in two by another group I'm establishing, which is all of the Huntress-based characters. Half Spirit's Torment is also kind of hard to power scale because presumably it doesn't have the same powers as Dredge, like canonically, and so I'm going to put it around here, as it's not even entirely clear what it would do alone as this sort of ghostly tunnel thing. Maybe it even gets consumed by the true Dredge. That'd be pretty cool. I could see there being a clash and mutual fall between both Miss Fucci and Jabberwock, two creations on the artist, but both powerful and monstrous to some extent. Jabberwock being a crazy unknowable creature and Miss Fucci having a detachable jaw. I could see them brawling it out and seeing who comes out on top. I think this would be pretty matched though. Maybe Miss Fucci swallows Jabberwock, but then Jabberwock tears her apart from within, or they're both beaten by the murderous Grizzly, who I think would be the final one to fall in this wave, as really it's just a bear, which is formidable, but would be overwhelmed by the smarter creatures, even with the cat's control. I'm sure with Trapper's prowess as well, maybe the way Grizzly dies is by getting caught in a remaining trap, and being swarmed by the Knight and his boys. It's here where we reach the halfway point. A little less than half the characters remain, but many of them strong and allied at this point, ready to fight against each other, as the more formidable forces. Everyone who's alive now is realistically incredibly strong, but some would begin to fall due to certain weaknesses. Pinhead and Shatterer and their bond together would be shattered, I think, as their main weapon is chains. And what are they realistically meant to do with these when they're facing characters who can easily break and resist them? They don't have the same kind of weaponry that most do, and so they'd either retreat to hell, or fall to an unstoppable force like Nemesis. I mean, how in the realm are they meant to bind him with chains? The lethal pursuer. The Eddies are another crew that would form surely, as they're all essentially the same guy, so I think they'd form. They also make up quite a good crew as they've got various forms and abilities. I'm assuming whilst they are skins for some of these characters though, that they wouldn't retain the exact same powers, like Tribute Eddie likely doesn't have the same powers as actual Dredge, if that makes sense. So there'd be a solid squad but ultimately overthrown by a stronger one. Maybe Wesker and Birkin would team up to take them down, being buddies originally, and even get Nemesis to help too. Get the whole Umbrella squad as it's quite a formidable force. Birkin I would say is the weaker of the two though, and so perhaps he would fall in this brawl as well. Another big clash and rivalry that would go down would be Huntress and Werelk. Although they are debatably the same character, for this purpose they're split, and there's nothing Huntress hates more than Elks after her mother died to one, and so I think from the very start they'd be fighting all out, leaping around, throwing hatchets, and getting into an all-out brawl, likely resulting with Werelk winning, simply being the stronger of the two, but likely badly wounded, open to a final blow from someone else. Maybe even one of the other Huntress type characters. Minotaur would fight strongly as well, but fall to possibly a more aggressive character who wants to prove dominance like Oni. The two are paired together on a skin after all, and so likely share a similar mindset. Oni is surely going to be dashing around, slaughtering as many as he can do, as is his whole thing. The next two to go I think would be Baba Yaga and Mordeo, the other two Huntresses. I could see them being paired together though and actually working alongside one another, aiming to protect the woods they're in, and defend from the other external threats. I could see them fighting maybe the ghouls, who I think would also team up, both Kaneki and Rize, this being their match met, with both ghouls being far too quick and strong, and hungry as well, to gain blood and become enraged, so they can defeat the others even faster. So I think they'd both fall ultimately. The final one here I think would be Spirit, a character who is small and maybe doesn't pack too much of a punch, but she's almost impossible to catch, being quick and going completely invisible, and also likely being somewhat invulnerable, with her already being in pieces. Her blade is also powerful with it shattering on impact. I also do think she'd team up with her great X5 grandfather, Oni, and help him out, but ultimately be taken down by a greater force like Vecnase, enraging Oni. Uh-oh. Now only the strong remain. We are truly left with only the heavy hitters now, and it does become increasingly hard to know who would fall from this point on, and it all does sort of depend on how you decide to power scale the characters. There's a few sneaks in here though, which are both Wraith and Ghostface, two literal sneaks and characters who I think could feasibly survive by mostly hiding and disengaging, Wraith by cloaking and Ghosty by evading carefully. Wraith would ultimately get found though by maybe a Xeno or someone with careful tracking, removing his spine. Then Ghosty I think would have to be outsmarted by someone intelligent but also powerful like Dracula, hating the sneaky human. Unknown is another character who will have slimed its way through the various waves with its slipperiness and the fact that it's essentially just a mass of tentacles and would be able to mimic others and avoid them with ease. We also know from Jason's lore though that canonically it's pretty powerful and did put up a good fight against him. I could see there being a round 2 for these two, where they battle it out once more, with Jason winning once again, this time a lot easier due to knowing more about it. Freddy is another where whilst he is realistically very powerful as a dream demon, his effects likely only really work on human characters, which are far and few between for the remaining ones. I think he'd manage to torment the lower characters and just survive generally, as he has to be slain in the real world and the dream world to die. But eventually again, a similar thing of basically a stronger character would catch up, or simply there'd be a character he has literally no effect on, like a Demogorgon say, or even Henry, maybe them both together, with Henry having similar abilities, but also just powerful telekinesis too, killing Freddy. We're also left with some more monstrous characters as well, such as Krampus and Leshen. Krampus I think would actually be left alone by many due to being sort of a killer reward sent by the entity to punish the survivors. Ultimately though, it would have to go at some point, and what better point than fighting another formidable foe like the Leshen, a tree demon. The two would be pretty evenly matched I think, as powerful, somewhat demonic creatures, defeating one another or injuring one another enough, making them easy kills to finish. The other clash I could see here would be both Luxie and Pyramid Head, the clash of judgmental executioner type killers who both punish the guilty. I could see them essentially wanting to punish the other for the guilt of all they've done, somewhat hypocritically maybe, but also to prove themselves as the true executioner and tormentor. I think again this would be a fairly even match to be honest, but Luxie would fall first with a swift great knife blow to his shoulder. From here a fitting end to Pyramid Head would be him falling on his own blade, his job complete. Next, the powerful begin to clash, the next tier up of strength, all of them being insanely formidable in their own right. I could see this whole wave just being a big mash as the strongest of the strongest mostly hang back and let the lesser ones brawl, as they'd be more eager too, as many are aggressive or animalistic or both. This clash would consist of Singularity, Jason, the Xenos, Oni, Knight, Wesker, and Nemesis, a brawl for the ages. This is a clash of lots of characters who are physically powerful, but they do lack that supernatural factor that will get them to the very end. The first to fall in this group I think would be Singularity, with him largely getting by due to being physically strong but also very intelligent. However, with the groups here he's probably going to be outnumbered fast and lacks a clear useful weapon with just his claw, so he gets pulled apart by Wesker and Nemesis. The next clash would be Knight and Oni, the two swordsmen battling it out, with I think probably Oni winning if it was just one-on-one, but struggling given the presence of the undead guards too, which would aid Knight and give him the victory, leaving Oni dead. Jason would go next I think, with him being able to pin down some of the others, but unable to hold on from there. Although he is strong and has a lot of power behind his swings, ultimately I think he would still fall when faced with a character like Nemesis, or even Wesker for that matter, who would simply overpower him and have a wider variety of abilities to defeat him with. Whilst he will inevitably come back, a swift Nemi step would put him down for a good while. From here there'd be a three-way battle between Knight and his guards, Wesker and Nemesis, and the two Xenos. I could see this being quite a brutal fight, but result with the winners being both Wesker and Nemesis, as I believe they're simply the strongest and fastest out of the lot, and are also easily the most durable. Knight is slower in his armor, and even though his blade is likely sharp, I doubt it can cut Nemesis or Wesker down, so Knight would go down first, followed by the Xenos who would be outpaced and overpowered by the two BOWs. 7 minutes is all they could spare to play with them. As the last two remaining and the victors of the brawl, I think both Wesker and Nemesis would likely be overpowered by one of these stronger forces, swept up by the three Titans or possibly Vecna and his Demogorgon, leaving us with few left. Now only the most powerful remain. It's here where another brawl would happen I think between the next tier of stronger characters and remaining groupings, with all of these top tier people grouping up to stand a chance against the true powerhouses. Kaneki and Rize, the three Titans, and Vecna and his Demogorgon. 3 forces which all have substantial power, then lone characters of Dracula, Vecna, Sadako, and Dredge, each of them not exactly being ones for alliances, nor needing them. I think the weakest grouping here is probably the 2 ghouls, and I could see Dracula taking them on, a battle of the bloodsuckers, with the 2 ghouls being fast and making use of their Kagane, but Dracula transforming into his true form and utilizing his own tentacle-mouthed things to overpower them, killing both and feasting on their blood. The next to go I think would be Vecna and his Demogorgon, as they're both very strong, but I think would be overpowered by the even stronger forces. Vecna is strong, but is going to have some beef with real Vecna, who would surely want to lord over this guy who has been given his same name by a bunch of kids. He'd want to prove a point by striking him down and likely whittling him into bones like he does the survivors. The Demogorgon would be a small inconvenience that he would surely defeat with ease, with it just being a foot soldier essentially. The last group to fall would be the Titans, made up of the Armored, Warhammer, and Attack Titan. These 3 would be a powerful force together, but I do think would eventually have some discord between themselves and end up attacking one another, leading to an all-out Titan fight, which would result in them all being pretty badly injured, cleaned up by either Vecna or Dracula. This brings us to the last one standing, Dracula, Vecna, Sadako, and Dredge. These 4 would survive as they're simply the most powerful and in some ways almost impossible to overpower, Vecna being a highly powerful lich, Dracula being able to switch forms and being enhanced with his abilities as a vampire, and being immortal essentially, Sadako often being completely untouchable due to her literally demanifesting, and Dredge being a literal fog and embodiment of evil. The first to fall here though I think would be Sadako, as while she can curse the others, I'm not sure it would work, and the same goes for her telekinesis. I don't think she'd be able to overpower the others with this, or her Nensha attacks, with them likely being able to just shrug them off, unlike almost every other killer. This would leave her exposed, or at least at a point where she'd eventually have to relent and give up, even if they can't really directly damage her still, a surrender of sorts. This would result in a huge clash between Vecna and Dracula, a battle that is somewhat pointless in a way because they're both so extremely powerful in their own ways and on their own power scales. I think realistically Vecna is the stronger of the 2, with him destroying on a far larger scale than Dracula, even though he too is highly powerful. In the realm though I could see them being quite evenly matched, injuring one another irreparably. This is where Dredge would come in and sweep them up and all of the other bodies into its massive fog. An unkillable and unknowable force, consuming them all for the victory. How do you beat it after all? Even though it may not kill them all, it would consume them all and keep them trapped, I think. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts as always down below. Who do you think would win? Thanks, and goodbye.